Thank you, Mr. Chairman. General Garland, thank you for being here today and for your testimony. It will come as no surprise to you that my constituents in East Texas are not pleased with the ATF under the ultimate authority of the DOJ, as you know, which is elected to implement some extremely stringent gun control policies. My colleague from the other side was mentioning some of those. Simply by administrative fiat and rulemaking, this includes things like the pistol brace rule that attempts to restrict millions of Americans, and in particular disabled veterans, from owning a firearm accessory that helps them discharge their pistols in a stabilized manner. The frame and receiver, or the ghost rule, as it's known, which expands the definition of several terms associated with firearms in order to subject them to regulation by the ATF. And the zero tolerance policy by the ATF against federal firearm licensed dealers, which really incentivizes those dealers not to cooperate with the ATF for fear of reprisal, because effectively that new rule allows the ATF to revoke the licenses of FFLs for simple technical and non-material paperwork. That's what I'm hearing from my dealers back home. And finally, the overly broad application of the, quote, engaged in business rule, which overextended the definition to, as the ATF now interprets, quote, even a single transaction or offer to engage in a transaction when combined with other evidence may be sufficient to require a license as an FFL, end quote. The rule states that, quote, absent reliable evidence to the contrary, individuals are presumed to be, quote, engaged in the business of dealing in firearms if their conduct falls within one of the ATF's specified presumptions, and those presumptions are not exhaustive, as you know. So it really flips the burden of proof and presumes that Americans engaged in conduct disfavored by the ATF are breaking the law unless they can prove their innocence, and that's simply turning, I think, it upside down. To what extent was your office involved in crafting or approving these policies?
Well, I approved all of those rules, and if you give me a minute, I'll go through each one so that you can explain to your constituents. So with respect to the brace, it does not apply to an arm brace applied by a disabled person or anyone else. The statute says if you have a rifle 16 inches or smaller intended to be fired from the shoulder, that it has to be registered. The shoulder braces, which are only used to fire from the shoulder, turn it into a short-barreled rifle. They turn a pistol, a short-barreled pistol, into a short-barreled rifle. And
well, we know that there's a short period of time, and I think your department has even admitted a short period of time within which folks had to register, and we had millions of people across America that were supposed to register, a lot of whom were serving overseas at the time and couldn't do it within the specified period. And in fact, we sent a letter that asked your department to extend the period of time, at least extend the period of time within which they could register, and you guys rejected that. But since you reviewed and approved all these, and I know that you're crafting these at the behest of the president, which is certainly your right to do, one of the things I can't wrap my head around is the fact that on one hand, the administration is saying it's cracking down on guns. That was a quote. But here in D.C., the U.S. Attorney, also under your ultimate authority, actively chooses to let hardened criminals who commit crimes with illegal firearms walk away scot-free from their criminal actions. Under U.S. Attorney Matthew Graves, here's what has happened in D.C. His office has declined to prosecute 32% of the carrying a pistol without a license cases in 2023, up from 15% in 2018. 60% of those convictions in 2023 were misdemeanors, which is up from 25% between 2018 and 2021. This rose to 48% misdemeanor rate in U.S. Attorney Graves' first full year, and then 60%, a record high last year. Were you aware of these statistics?
Mr. Graves is an experienced former career prosecutor. It's impossible to make these judgments based on numbers. It depends on what the evidence is in the cases. My understanding is that those percentages have increased now, and my information is that the crime rate in the District of Columbia in the first quarter of this year is now going down.
Have you had a discussion about why he's not prosecuting more gun crime here in D.C.?
He is putting huge priorities into prosecuting violent crime in the District of Columbia, and the Maine Justice has provided assistance from the FBI, ATF, and the marshals, as well as assistant U.S. attorneys from other locations to help him do that.
Well, I find it interesting that he's declined to prosecute 30% of the assault cases with dangerous weapons in 2022. He also simultaneously blames the crime lab for a lack of prosecution, but he takes credit for, quote, effectively building a makeshift Department of Forensic Science, while felony drug convictions are down 88% since 2017. Drug convictions, as you know, are one of the main ways D.C. targets gangs, crews that drive so much of the gun violence. I'm frankly in awe that that D.C. and the department has allowed him to go that direction and not called him to the carpet for it. We need more prosecution of those gun crimes here in D.C. and elsewhere. I yield back.